All right. Hi, welcome to the August 18th, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. I'm just going to do a quick audio test on my end, make sure everything is okay. Bear with me just a second. Let me refresh my browser. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have audio going on. We can, let me just mute that. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for today's Hangout. The Hangout, how this works is we can submit questions in advance to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, or we could just ask your comments in the chat field. This is being presented live, so you could ask questions in the chat field, or you have the capability to send them in advance. So we'll try to get through as many questions as possible in our live stream. We'll go for several hours today. So, and if you, as you're asking questions, sometimes it could depend on which version of Cubase that you're running. So sometimes it's helpful if you could specify running Cubase AI, Cubase Pro, Cubase Artist. That's always helpful. And if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that just kind of clears up the chat stream so we get through more questions. We'll try to get through them as chronologically as possible. We will try to get through each question as completely and succinctly as possible, but if we just kind of keep asking the same question, so as I'm responding, it may be well behind the live chat. We have some people that are usually very helpful with answering some quick questions during the live part as I'm slowly catching up. And if you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and we'll get some people logged in. And as we get people logged in, we will then start to, in about 10 minutes after the hour. So if you're watching the replay of this, you may want to fast forward. We will try to have the index of topics and questions that were asked in today's Hangouts either really late tonight or tomorrow morning completed, so you could just jump to particular questions if you want. So we'll try to have that set up soon, but we'll let some people get logged in. And let's go ahead and take a quick look of who is on the Hangout. So if you're watching this on a replay, you don't have to introduce yourself. You're more than welcome to. All right, so we have Ace from Texas. All right, so we have Sweden. We have Ted Springman from Sherman Oaks. All right, so we have Terry Gray from Minneapolis. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right, so more people from Sweden. Okay, just going to... Okay, so we have Matt from Fort Wayne. We have Millard from Pennsylvania. We have Agent K, who always is helpful, does some moderation for us when needed. I think it hasn't been so bad recently. Hopefully it's not too much of an imposition, but we appreciate Agent K's efforts. All right, so we have Soren and Sophia from Sweden. Always wanted to visit Sweden. Okay, so we have Finland, we have Greencastle, Pennsylvania, Slovenia. Gareth is on Hangout. Good to see. I think he may have missed the last one. All right. Okay, so we have Wisconsin. Okay, so we have Canada, we have Oslo. All right, I'm gonna turn down my phone so you don't have to hear emails come in. Okay, so we have India, Boston. Okay, so we have LA, Stockholm. You can see Jan. We have Sri Lanka, Queens, New York, Greece, Sweden, Finland. Amazing people. Just comment. So Owings Mills, Maryland. Not too far from me. I'm actually broadcasting from the United States, as you can probably tell by my accent. And I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Let's see who else. So we have Norway. Get started here again in just a couple minutes. Okay. We have Liverpool. Always wanted to go there as well. Should have gone pre-pandemic. See more places around the world. Hopefully we'll... Okay, we'll wait just a couple more minutes. All right. So other people from Stockholm. All right. All right. So we have Justin from Fredericksburg. Is that maybe from Fredericksburg, Virginia? Not too far from me. About 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, and if you want to start asking questions in the comments field in the chat area, we'll go through. And we had some people that had submitted some questions in advance, so we'll make sure we get to those today. And wait just about another minute or so and get started. All right, so we have Switzerland. So just see a comment if you want to get here. Someday you will, Greg. So hopefully the Cavern Club I read. I know it's not the original Cavern Club, but I heard that was closing in Liverpool. So hopefully it'll survive the pandemic. But let's go ahead and okay, so let's go ahead and start with some questions. Okay, so a question from Ace. Hi, Greg. Hope you and your family are safe and doing well. We are. Thanks for asking. Can Cubase 10.5 create chord suggestions to accompany melodies or detect chords from a vocal melody or violin melody? Thanks. You know, if it's going to be broken down, let's go ahead and just give it a shot here. So, say if I have a vocal, and let me switch over to the correct audio interface so you guys could hear. That would be helpful. As you can see, I don't have enough audio interfaces currently in my system. Okay, so now we could do this. So let's say if I just have a melody and I want to, within VariAudio, I think it's not designed to do chord suggestions from just a single voice, but we'll give it a shot. So I will come over here to my VariAudio and I will just do extract MIDI. information, because I think it's going to basically, it can do automatic chord detection. But if I wanted to, I think we have a chord track already, so I'm going to do a new track version of this. And let's see if it will even do a chord. I don't think it would, but let's go to the chord tracks and let's say create chord symbols. And let's just see what it comes up with. So it did kind of come up with some chords based on a single melody, but it may not be the best chords. And if I wanted to switch back and forth between these, so it looks like it, it might be able to, but it's going to be probably a better choice when having a full chord suggestion to work with. But let's just come here, look at, so this is, based on the melody, and then this is based on what I had entered in. So, you can get some chord suggestions from just a single voice, but, you're probably going to be more accurate for, determining major and minor chords from an actual part with multiple notes and chords in it. Okay, so I see a movie suggestion from Ted for my son, so I'll check out Alpha. Sounds like an interesting movie. I guess his friend did costume design, so I'll put that on the list to check out. Thanks. So question, if a quarter track A is playing instrumental track B, will chord track with just a few alternate chords have any effect on B, even though B has no MIDI notes recorded on track? So let's give this a shot here. So I will come to this project. Okay, just rereading the question here. Okay, so let's say if I have just a quarter, so if I wanted to go to the MIDI inserts, and I believe this is probably with the quarter MIDI plugin, and I'll just load up a quick example. So as I play. Okay, so it says if quarter track A is playing instrument track B, will chord track with just a few alternate chords have any effect on B, even though B has no MIDI notes recorded on the track? So what you might be able to do is if I have this, and this is, let's say I will bypass this and I'll just record some single notes in this particular part. So now when I play this back and I activate the quarter, but if I wanted to, one of the things that you could do also is just send this from if it's on a MIDI track to start with. So let's say if I have an instrument here, if I wanted to send it to another, so let's say I start with an instrument rack and we do a Hallian Sonic SE. And let's say I'll just do a quick organ patch here. Okay, so at this point, okay, I will just reset that. So let's just find a quick. And let's say we have, let's just find a quick. And what I could do is take this. If it's a MIDI track, you have not only MIDI inserts, but MIDI sends. So at this point, I could have the quarter track go directly to the Rhodes patch. So I could play just one particular note here. So let's say if I go to jazz, and as I play a note on the organ, I could just send a MIDI, the quarter track, to the Rhodes patch. So even though it doesn't have MIDI notes on it, you could use a, just doing a. So that will have the, send the information from this particular MIDI track out to my Rhodes patch, and that could go through the organ. And you could also do this if you want to do like arpeggiator. So as I play a chord, I could have the Rhodes just kind of arpeggiate. So let's say if I just grab this and I can hold down an organ chord. And this way I could hold a chord. And this MIDI send is sending it directly to another voice. So if that's what you kind of want to do, Ted, you could use a MIDI track and route that MIDI track directly to another source and have the quarter only affect whatever device you want to. Okay, so we have, hello everyone, Greg, question. In time stretching an audio part, for instance, a riser, is it possible to say stretch first half at a slower rate, more below, and build rate of time stretch to a faster speed and to get a better overall effect? I know it's a more advanced question, but figured you are the best to ask. So let's say if I wanted to do just a quick synth type of sound, some of the stuff that you could do. And let me just see. Like if I wanted to have, let's say if I just had like a synth patch here. And I'll go ahead and bypass the. So let's say if I have something like this, so if you wanted to kind of do a riser, it'd stretch kind of the first half at a slower rate and build a rate of time to stretch at a faster speed. So I will just kind of draw in like one single note here, and we'll hold it out for. So we play this back. I'll just have one pitch. And let's say I will, at this point, just kind of draw this out a bit longer. And if I wanted to render this as audio, I will go to like a render in place. So if we have just a normal audio file like so. Okay, one of the things that you could do is if you have tempo changes, is so if I have just a quick signature track, At this point, we could say, I want this to start slow and then let's say speed up over time. So if we listen to our tempo map, we can now, if we put, and once we do this, we could also put a different time stretch mode on this. This might work with where you could say, okay, you want this to be into musical mode, and then you could choose kind of the different algorithms for this. So let's say, so when I come here, we could choose, and then we could choose a different algorithm that would be kind of like a tape. So at this point, we would see the pitch of this. So if you wanted to do something, like that, you could definitely kind of just change. And that way it kind of speeds up and slows down. And you could do that, for all of your tracks. And, if you only want some of the tracks to pitch up, almost like an analog tape machine to kind of build that up, you could just have those in tape mode for the algorithm there. So hopefully that helps Scambot. But if I'm completely off, let me know. Okay. All right, so I was saying it's 10 a.m. in Mesa, Arizona, and it's 102 degrees already. But in all fairness, you probably, you are living in Arizona in August, so, but it's hot. Okay. So I just see question, is Cubase support still in lockdown, and are we able to call and get team viewer assistance again? So, our support team has been working remotely. I know in the U.S., and I think Scambot that you're based in the U.S., if I'm not mistaken. But while they're not going to the office in Carmel, Indiana, they are still helping people and doing team viewer sessions for people. So I don't think the office in the U.S. Shut down. They just kind of took their laptops home and started working remotely. So, but if you're not in the U.S., I think it's similar. But if you're not in the U.S. trying to get support there, just let me know. But I think that our team in Europe and some of the different distributors throughout the country may have support that could be different. Okay, so I just see a comment. Hello, please MIDI latency solve. So when you have latency for different virtual instruments, so I will just revert this quickly. So every system will have latency, but there's some tips and tricks that you could do to minimize the latency in your system. The first most obvious one is to just use a lower buffer size. So if I wanted to come to, let's say, just like a quick, Rhodes patch, I could, and you can see that this latency is, is very high, no issues with the latency there. So you can probably hear as I hit the keyboard on the microphone and hear. So if you wanted to adjust the latency, what you could do is go to your studio setup, select your audio interface, and probably go to the control panel and just adjust the buffer size. So the lower the buffer, the lower the latency, but the lower the buffer also means that the it works harder on your computer. So where people get into a lot of problems is not, so if you adjust a buffer and it still has more latency than you would like, this could also be determined by plugins that are within the project. So if I put a big plugin, let's say some inserts on my master bus. So if I put a multi-band compressor, and let's say I put, convolution reverb, or let's say even I think under pitch, under pitch shift, we could choose, or modulation, when it's pretty intense latency, could be cloner. So now when I play note, that will impose latency. So, and it's just the processing time that it takes for that to occur, because it's trying to process those plugins in real time. One easy way to solve this is to just on the lower left-hand corner, click on the constrained delay compensation. So once you do that, it's going to take plugins that take a significant amount of latency and bypass them. So if I look at these now, we'll see that these plugins are bypassed, and I could play kind of without any annoying latency. But if I disable that I will have the latency. And if we actually look at our full mixer view, so let's say if I go to my full mix console, you could actually have a little option for channel latency monitor. And once you activate that, we could see the latency that's on a particular channel and what the breakdown is of the latency for each plugin that's being used. So that could cause a lot of issues. So if you have MIDI latency, try lowering the buffer and try hitting the constrain delay compensation. And that should, hopefully get rid of the latency issues that you run into. Okay, let's go on. Hi, Greg. When playing a VST instrument, the track pan's hard right. When pressing sustain pedal, if I have several instruments, this only happens to the instrument on the top, what to do. So a lot of times, I think that I would check to make sure, and I think we covered this a little bit maybe in the last one, is see what actual MIDI messages. So when you hit the sustain pedal, it should probably say MIDI CC 64. So if I go to my MIDI inserts, one of the great MIDI inserts that you can have is a MIDI monitor. So as I come here, I'm going to hit a sustain pedal, and as I hit my sustain pedal, I can see that this is going to be CC 64. I press it down, it's 127. When I release, it's going to be 0. So make sure that when you are actually transmitting, that it's seeing the correct MIDI CC that you would anticipate. So if you move your modulation wheel, you should see CC1. If I wanted to hit my sustain pedal, CC64. If I hit pitch bend, we can see all of my different pitch bend values. If I hit a MIDI note, I get an on and a note off message. So at this point, you could see. So if a lot of times what I've seen some people do is their controllers, if it's panning to the right, you could, if you see it doing CC64, when you hit the sustain pedal, that means that your MIDI controller is transmitting the correct message. Now, when it pans, and it says when it pans hard right, it could be something in the MIDI controller that's, taking a MIDI CC64 and transferring it to MIDI CC10. There could be a way to do this in Cubase, but you'd have to set it up called the input transformer. And here we could say I want to take, MIDI CC64. So I say, okay, we're going to say type is equal to controller. and we'll say value 1 of that controller, and I'll click here, and then you would say 64, and then you could say we wanted to subtract. We're going to take value 1, subtract 54. So now when I go to my MIDI monitor for this particular track, it'll show up as, once that's active, it should show up just as MIDI CC 10. So I think, make sure that your controller is actually spitting out the correct MIDI CC message first. And it could be that within a particular plugin that maybe, there's a controller reassignment. But I think it's going to be either your controller or something within the plugin, but unless you specifically went and created an input transformer to do. So now, once I do this, I'll go to my MIDI inserts, and then once I do that, it will send MIDI CC 10 every time I do that. And if it's going all the way to the right, that kind of indicates that something is being remapped, because probably all the way to the left would be a 0 or a MIDI CC value of 1, and all the way to the right would be 127. I think that's how MIDI, that MIDI CC messages for panning would work. So I think it's going to be something in your controller that's causing that. So I would pull up the MIDI monitor and just look to see exactly what is being transmitted from your controller. All right, so we have Matthew from Nigeria checking in. All right. Okay. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing great. I love the Bezier curves in Cubase automation. I just want to know if there's a way to do very precise moves when adjusting the curves when doing fine tuning. So if we have, let's say we'll just open up some automation, an automation lane here, and I will just quickly hide the data. So let's say if I am here and I have 2 different points, and now if I wanted to do a Bezier curve, so if I do this, we could adjust the curve, and as I want to, sometimes if you hold down for some of the adjustments, it doesn't, for a lot of adjustments in Cubase, you could kind of hold down the shift key for fine control, where you could do this and hold down the shift key. But doesn't look like it's occurs on the, let me see if there's a modifier key. So it doesn't look like there's a modifier key for fine control, but if you so you might just have to kind of enter it in precisely as you adjust. Let me see if I'm just looking to see if there's another control here to do that. So usually in Cubase, the shift key is kind of fine, but it doesn't look like there's a fine control. But I think if you kind of zoom in, you may get more precise control as well over kind of the mapping of it. So I would try to do that. It could be your zoom factor may allow you to kind of adjust more precisely. Okay, going through introduction still. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that and give a thumbs up if you're kind of learning something new throughout the Hangout. Okay, and occasionally my chat window will jump, so as it just did. Okay, just Okay, so we have a question. Can you show how to save channel presets or similar techniques to improve workflow? So, if you wanted to just save channel presets, so let's say, this is my favorite drum or vocal preset, and as I've done this, and channel presets can contain all of the EQ settings, your volume, pan, and let's say our insert effects, and with that also your full channel strip. So once I have this, and if I know that I want to use this for other tracks in the project, or this is my studio piano, all you have to do is just kind of right click and save track preset. So you could just say, we'll call it August 8th, 18th. So we'll say new preset. So if I wanted to now add a new track, we could say add track using track preset. So at this point, I will just kind of so I could right click and we'll say using track preset. So I will now just come over here. I'll say August 18th and double click. And we could do this for a single track or multiple tracks. So if you have like a studio drum kit, instead of having to recreate that all the time, you could just save your multiple tracks. So we see my EQ, my panning, my volume, my plugins and inserts, my channel strip. Everything's kind of automatically preserved. So it's a great thing to kind of, as you go through projects. I remember when I worked in big rooms in New York, it's very typical when the client left, and this is kind of in the age of like when everyone's digital audio workstation was an Akai S1000 sampler, and once the client left, that the engineers would often go through the mix and just sample like every kick drum, every snare, just to kind of build up their library. So having a library of your personal presets is a great thing to have. So, when you're stuck in a creative rut, maybe, you just want to try something different, or a client's like, yeah, I really like that guitar sound you had on this project from 6 years ago. So, go through and be able to save those things. And if it's like a particular project, one of the things you can do in 10.5 is really expanded capabilities of importing tracks from projects. So we could select a particular project. So I'll come over here, say, okay, I want to go to this particular project. And if someone's like, I really like the vocal sound you got on that, we could say, okay, just open up that particular project, select the vocal, and you could import without automation or without the actual events or parts and just all the channel settings. So those aspects are really handy to be able to, and it could really speed up your workflow. All right, so we have people from Riverside and John from Kenosha. Good to see John again on a Hangout. Okay, so how do I bounce two tracks into one, audio and MIDI? So let's say if I have two, so let's say if I have an audio track here, let me just revert this quickly. So let's say I have an audio track, and let's say if I have a piano part. So I think I could just select both of these tracks if I wanted to. And let's just try a quick render in place. So I could say, let's get to my render settings. And at this point, we could just say I when I click on like channel settings, I can say mix down to one audio file and then just click on render. And now when I play this back, this audio file should be, let me see. If not, let me just try selecting both of the events here, see if we can get the drums and MIDI. So I'm going to, instead of selecting the tracks, let's see if we could just do this quickly. So do our channel settings, mix down to one file. So it looks like it's just doing just the MIDI, but we could also just come here, do an export audio mix down, and you could choose which tracks that you want to include. So I'll just say, I could choose, we could solo just those. And let's say after the export, I want to create an audio track, export. And then at the bottom, we will now just kind of have our submix. So, but let me just check. It seems like that should, this might be maybe routed somewhere differently. Let me just check here. Yeah. So those are a couple of different ways. Oh, okay. I think I see what it is. So let me just try one more time. I think I had the audio track record enabled. So now let's say if I don't have it record enabled, I think this will be included in the render in place. So we'll mix down to one file. And now those two files, my MIDI and my audio, will just be rendered at the same time. And you can do that and if you have, we had another question that was kind of similar to this of how to kind of merge two MIDI tracks together. Like, so let's say if we added a MIDI track or if I just wanted to take two different ones and I wanted to merge two MIDI tracks together, how to do this. So, if you copy on top, we have almost two different parts that are layered together. But if you wanted to merge these, so when I double click, I can see one part and then there's another part below it. But when I kind of treat these this way, it's like two separate MIDI parts that are separate and unique. And if I wanted to merge these, I could grab the glue gun and hold down the Alt key or Option key and click. And now that will merge both of those MIDI parts directly together like so. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so just a question, see comment. Hi, Greg. Mircia, hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. From Dallas, thank you for doing this for us. You're welcome. I hope it's helpful. Okay, so a question from Scambot Terminator. Greg, question. When recording in MIDI, say like from Omnisphere plugin VST, when I tried to shorten MIDI to fit time, the part continues to play even though I shortened and or cut or erased part of it. So if we have a particular note, let's say if I'm here and I place this into record and I'll just hit, let's say just one long note here. Okay, so, and then at this point, if I choose to cut Let's just kind of jump closer. So we see this note, and so let's say right there, we see kind of the long note. All right, so what we could do is and if we, at this point, say we're right here, and I split this particular note, so let's say I cut to the part and erased it, that sometimes that note may still hang on, so let's give it a shot. So even though that part doesn't exist, we're still hearing the MIDI note. All right, so there's a preference for this. So if we come to your Cubase preferences, and I think it's under editing and then MIDI, there's going to be a split MIDI event. So once I come here and I have that turned on, at this point I cut the particular note, and let me just get this kind of in sync. So when I cut the note here and erase that, we see that that note will cut off. So we go here. So once again, so you could see that as a note. I'm going to adjust one other preference here quickly. So you can see it a little easier. So as soon as I split a MIDI note, when I do that, this note isn't affected because we split the container, but the note is still going on. So go to Preferences, and under Editing MIDI, you want to make sure that Split MIDI Events, once you have that turned on. So we split, and now I erase notes. But even now that I split, we'll see that I'll probably just re-trigger the MIDI note, I believe. And as soon as I erase, then that note will be cut off. But if I have that preference not turned on, what I could do is, so as I split the event, the underlying note message, even if that event is split and erased, that note is still going to continue on. Like right now, even though that event doesn't exist. So once again, just go to Preferences, to Editing MIDI, Split MIDI Events. Okay, so, all right, just reading through questions. Says, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you speak Chinese? It's from Hey There, Malaysia. So unfortunately, I don't speak Chinese, Mandarin or Cantonese. So I'm sorry. But at the end of the Hangout, it will be kind of closed captioned, and we have a lot of people that will, and a lot of people use that to, run into translation services. Sorry, I'm just kind of the dumb American who only speaks English, American English. Okay, so question, hi, is there a way to quantize an audio file which is not in fixed tempo to a fixed tempo? Yeah, so we'll show you what you could do. So let's say if I go to, I have an audio file that's varying in tempo. And I want it to be a set fixed tempo without necessarily having to quantize. So we come here. So there's no correlation between the click and what we're listening to in the audio. So I will select the file. I will come to my project menu and choose a tempo detection. And now it's done a tempo detection of the file. And we can see that every beat is basically slightly out of, a variation of the previous one. So I think this is going to be my downbeat. So now we listen to it. So if I want this particular file to play back at a perfect steady tempo, I could select the event. I will go to my audio menu to advanced, and I will say set definition from tempo. And what this does is it basically embeds all of the tempo changes of every single beat as metadata into the file. And if I want to play back, instead of it varying tempo, I say let's make it 144. I can just type in one steady tempo value, turning off the tempo track so it's not following the tempo changes. Or if I want it to be 156, so now it's playing perfectly steady, again without having to quantize. So that's how you could, basically it's not necessarily quantizing the audio file, but applying a fixed tempo to an audio file that had a varying tempo. Okay, so I just see, edit a question. How can I snap timeline bar to bar marker to a MIDI note using warp? So, if we have, let's say, a MIDI event here. So I'll just add a quick instrument track. All right, and I want to put the bar line to a specific MIDI event here. So I'll just do my 21st century composition there. Watch out, it's copywritten, so don't steal that. All right, but if we go into what's called the time warp editor, at this point, let's say I want measure 97 to be, okay, so I'll just turn on the tempo track. So this is, on this particular note is where, I want, measure 101 just to this particular note. So you select this tool, and what this is going to allow you to do is to basically just kind of move, the actual bars to match up with, the events. So you could, on the main time window, you could switch to like the time warp tool here and be able to move the bar to, I'll just move this MIDI event maybe out of range of the tempo changes, since we have that already kind of defined. So, if this is where measure 420 should be right on this particular note. I just move the bar line here with this tool to match up. And right at that point, I need this bar line to end right at this particular note. So you can say, measure 419. This bar should start right at this particular note. So again, select your time warp tool and be able to move that. And you could just kind of place different warp markers here. Say this is where that note falls. this measure, this beat and you can do this on a beat by beat basis or by bar. And that's how you could move the tempo or the downbeat to match a particular note. So that's moving the bar number to MIDI note. So, all right, good to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. And also I saw the Jazz Dude is on the Hangout. So I see, hi Greg, Mircia from Dallas. Is it possible to select an instrument channel inside the Hallian or another Steinberg via MIDI? So, all you have to do, depending on, whatever, you could have it to the point of, if it's from the MIDI controller, you could choose to just have the particular file. Let me just jump back to my other project. All right, I'll just kind of open this up. Okay, so let's say in this particular program, I have I'll just add an instrument track. So say like your Hallian Sonic SE. So as I'm here, let's say I have my different tracks selected and I will add a couple of MIDI tracks. So when I'm here, this will automatically kind of play the particular sound in Hallian just by selecting the track. So, once you have, so maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it says, is it possible to select an instrument channel inside the Hallian or another from Steinberg via MIDI? So, here we have our different tracks and you could use, your different keyboard shortcuts. So that's MIDI channel 2. Or if I select this, we can see MIDI channel 3 or MIDI channel 4 just to do that. So that's how you could select different instruments kind of within Hallian is, just having the tracks that are routed to the different channels like so. But if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. We could probably still catch it in the Hangout. It's still early. Okay, so I just see, hi guys, is it possible to get more color options in Cubase Artist, or are we limited to just a few? So if we hit, I think it's Option or Alt Option plus Shift plus S, this will bring up the color palette. So I think by default we may have 16 colors. And this may work the same way in Artist, but I'm inclined to say that would. But if we go to presets, I get this question periodically in Hangouts, like, oh, how can I get your color scheme, all your available colors? And all I do is really just say, okay, I want 32 colors, and I want it, for, number of color tints. And at this point, you could choose basic colors or different color tints. And as soon as I hit apply, at this point, when I go to choose a color, we could have, a whole color palette. So I think that you could do the same thing. So if you go, I think it's under project color setup from the project menu and go to presets, and you could try to expand using those particular color options. So see if your artist version, I'm inclined to say that it probably would do that. You could have different colors, and if you wanted to be as precise as to go through and edit the colors, you could double click and you'll kind of get a color wheel that you could freely move around as well. So if you wanted to get different shades, you could do that. All right. So question, what is the best way to use Cubase for live implementation? Also, are there any plans? Also, are there any plans to add tools for live use in upcoming versions of Cubase? So, a lot of people use it to play back existing tracks. To play back virtual instruments. I've seen, I've had friends that have had entire shows where it's an electronic drum kit. The guitar player, bass player are using like the VST amp rack and the VST bass amp. The drummer is using Groove Agent, and the keyboard player is using, a bunch of different virtual instruments. The audio is going into a UR interface because they could process with reverb with no latency, and then just do the whole show and send it to front of house. People could build up like expression or arranger track icons for different parts or different songs. So as you come here, we could, let's say if, this was song 1, you could say, okay, this is song 2, song 3, and they have kind of a whole set lined up, and they have like a MIDI foot switch to go to the next event or to, the next marker. So you could definitely do that. Like Hans Zimmer probably had like one of the more elaborate live productions I've ever seen. It was a pretty amazing show if you ever get a chance to see a Hans Zimmer live performance. Like all their virtual instruments, everything was being done entirely in Cubase, and it was quite a bit of virtual instruments that people were playing live. He called it kind of the 19th member of the band. And that worked phenomenally well for him as well. So there's lots of stuff that kind of already exists for live use as well. So. Okay. So question, is there a way to hear Cubase playback while in another screen on computer? When playing back track, when I switch to different screen, you no longer hear Cubase playback. So it could be, so make sure that you have, it could depend upon like audio interface drivers, but if you come here, go to like your VST audio system, and try toggling the status of release driver when application is in the background. So, but that could do it. But if I come and let's say as I'm playing here and I go to my OBS, it still continues to play. So it could be that your other program that you're switching to might be trying to take control of the audio interface driver. So you may want to tell it not to do that. So if you go to like a web browser, so you may want to, come over here and tell Cubase not to release the ASIO driver in the background. So, but I haven't really had a problem with that. But I've had Cubase playing while web browsing and different stuff like that. Okay. So I see a question. Why does VST Connect Pro transfer mono files in stereo? So I think as you work with the VST Connect Pro, if you do just like the add create VST Connect Pro SE at that point, that the default mode will be set to stereo. But if we come over here, let's see, I think I may have just kind of a quick project set up. So let's say if I come here on this particular track, you could add an audio track and say we want it to be mono. And then for its input here, we would want it to be VST Connect. And instead of just choosing VST Connect, try to make sure that you specify VST Connect left or VST Connect right. And then you're able to record a mono source. That's how it's always kind of worked for me. So if I do kind of the default add, the automated process here of, creating a VST Connect, at that point, it'll create a stereo file for me. But, you could just add a mono file, and then just set the input from whatever interface connection you have there. So when I've done it, it's, that's how I've gotten it to do mono for me. Okay. Thanks for all the great questions. We'll move onward. Okay, just... All right. So, all right, let's keep going. Okay, just kind of keep going. All right, so people are happy to see their Hangout friends all together. Okay, so just see a question. Love to hang out, Greg. Got another question. Is it possible to view grid lines in the envelope pitch shift in offline processing or any other way to automate pitch of audio tracks based on the grid? So let's go. So I think it's really going to be kind of based upon, let's take a look at it. So let's say if I have just this audio file here. Let me just select this loop. Okay, so I'll select this and then we'll hit F7 and go to like our pitch shift. So it's really could be more bass. Let's just take a look when we go to our envelope here. So you don't necessarily see the grid lines because it's not necessarily doing it to the grid, but to the audio file, but you can kind of visually see. So let's set our range to 12, so you could say, at this point, I want to, add this particular hit. So you could see kind of the waveform visually and just say, I want it at that point, and I could just say, let's just do time correction. And I could see, just do it not based on the grid, but on the actual waveform, which, sometimes may help. And then as we've done this, I could take this one particular audio file and hear it butchered pretty well. So I will come here. And if I do it in a correct, if I activate the project, that would help. So So that way we're kind of just doing it all based on, the visual waveform, but it doesn't really show the grid per se because it's thinking of it as, on the particular audio file itself. All right, good to see Vinny Sabatino on the Hangout. All right, seeing nice discussion of Philadelphia cheesecakes. I remember one time going out with DJ Jazzy Jeff and Curtis Dowd in Philadelphia, having cheesesteaks with them. It was kind of a crazy ride. Anyway, good times. All right, so we see the tape mode and tempo mode for pitch bending, a revelation of the day already. All right, so I got it in like the first hour for Gareth. So if I get a revelation, I feel like I did my job. Okay. Okay, so I guess I got Scambot's question answered. Okay, so it says, hi there, I'm not as talented on the keyboard. Is there a way I could maybe sing a lick into an audio file and have it converted to a MIDI file? Yeah, so you could definitely do that. So my keyboard skills are not ideal, and I know I should just practice after all these years. I could have been a great concert pianist if I actually had a piano with me in all my travels and evenings in hotel rooms. So, but let's say if I have a particular audio file, like here's a pretty good example where we could have a saxophone file. So if we're in VariAudio, I'll just activate the VariAudio. So as soon as we see kind of the VariAudio, one of the functions that you'll have under functions is just to extract MIDI. So at this point, you could choose to, do notes and static pitch bend. But if you're running it to an instrument like a Halligan Sonic, SE3 or Halligan based or Retrolog Pad Shop, you could use the VST3 components. So, and I had this kind of pre-done where, I always kind of joke that, the worst thing you could possibly have is like a MIDI saxophone for the most part, because it ends up sounding like this. So this is just a straight MIDI translation from the saxophone that I did. So while it's playing the same rhythm, the same notes, it really doesn't convey kind of any emotive aspect or the expressions. But with the expressions, what I've done is kind of captured it as well. So now if I just wanted to play that with the original. So it's, I've seen lots of people, just, okay, I want a brass part that goes da 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 da, and then say, okay, then they record it. I remember seeing a producer do that to his client, and as they were just doing that, then he would just do a quick VariAudio and just have a brass part, and they did the whole brass section that way very fast. So. Okay. Okay, so hey Greg, thanks for all the awesome tips. I'm trying to figure out how to remove EQ and any other effects that I put into my channel strip of a track. It seems to not let me remove everything. So let's say if I am here and I have my channel strip and I have EQs. So let's say I did an extremely bad EQ and I have like my channel strip set up. All right, so say I just totally destroyed all of my settings here. So I think with the channel strip, there's probably going to be, you know, as you come here, you could turn these on and off by individual modules to not have them loaded. But there's probably just going to be a channel strip preset that will maybe be like init. Often there's kind of an initial. Okay, so if not, we can make one. So let's come over here. And what I would do, and I think with the EQ, that you could come here and go to the EQ presets. And here we could just, let's say if we go to load preset, there's a default. And let's say if I go to the channel strip, let's see if there's default here. Okay, so I'll just make a channel strip default preset. So I will come here to add an audio track. And at this point, I'll go to my channel strip. I will save a strip preset. And we will call it default. Okay, so I go back to this track. Open it up. Let's go to my channel strip, load or strip preset, default, and you could just set it up like that. So let me know if that works for you. But you know, but you can, once you have, you know, everything kind of set up here, you could just choose to unload different sections on the EQ. If you're here, you could just turn off different bands of EQ or the pre section. Okay. You see a comment from Gareth K. Says latency monitor got it permanently on. It's good to be aware sometimes, you know, which functions that are causing latency for you. And sometimes, you know, people just throw like, oh, I'm going to put this plugin on my control room to do room correction. And the room correction has a, you know, obscene amount of latency in it. So, you know, sometimes different aspects can have, can impose a lot of latency. Okay. Going through questions. My chat field had jumped. Okay. Okay, so question, when recording audio within Cubase, the tempo applied to the audio file listed in audio pool does not match the tempo in the session. Is this a bug? So make sure, you know, let's see if I'll just do a quick recording to test. So let's say our tempo is at 78 BPM. I will quickly add an audio track and we'll call it test tempo stamp. All right, so I'm going to take my tempo track off and let's go ahead and record. Okay, so we recorded that file. Let's look in the pool window. And look at our audio file. So we can see that, all right, so we see that pool tempo. So that's matched our tempo that we have here. So let's do another recording. And I will change my time here. So we'll call this 88 beats a minute. All right, and let's go to 108. And see, we'll do a quick recording of this. Okay, so let's go to our pool window. So I can see 88, 78, 88, 1. I guess I set it to maybe 1800, but 360. So our current tempo stamps, they're all kind of applied correctly there. So, all right, so just make sure I'm not misreading it. So when recording audio within Cubase, the tempo applied to the file listed in the audio pool does not match the tempo in the session. So if you want to, forward a project to me at clubcubase at steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it. So it could, but it seems like that is kind of functioning as I would expect. So I will, once again, come here to 108. And do the recording and come directly to the pool window. So, and we'll see that the 108_02 is at the correct tempo stamp. So that all seems to be kind of working as expected on my end. But if you want to send me a project, you don't have to send the audio files, but just the .cpr file. I'd be happy to take a look at it and see if I could reproduce it on my end. Okay, so question, why does the quality of the audio degrade when using the latency button? They should fix that. So, if it's the constrained latency delay compensation, it could be. So let's say, I'll just go to another project here. So I'm not sure if it's going to actually change the quality of the audio, but we'll take a listen to just a quick file here. And let's say if on my master bus, I have a nice multi-band going on. So now, if I have that turned on, and I turn on the delay latency, so it may sound different, but really, in essence, all it's doing is it's perhaps bypassing effects that are on your master bus. So now that it's bypassed, I'll just hit this to always on top. So if this is the latency button that you're referring to, Vinny, make sure that it could be just bypassing your master effects and not necessarily changing the quality of the audio. So maybe that's what's going on. So I would check that and see, but it's not really going to change the actual quality of the audio. It shouldn't. Okay, so question, is there a way to quickly save samples I've made in the sampler track? I want to save them as the finished sample to create my own samples I can then recall in any project. So let's come over here. I want to take, let's say, a bass note. So let's say I just wanted to grab just one bass note here. All right, so I'll play this. Let me just select the right tool this time. All right, so say I just did just a horrible edit. I will bounce selection. And I'll just grab this to my sampler. Okay, so now when I want to play this particular sample track, I could so I'll pick this and I will just, so if I want to save that, I could just come over here and just save a track preset, I believe is what you could do. So we'll just say I have that, right click, save track preset. At this point, we'll call it August 18th. And I'll just call it August 18th bass sampler track. So I go to a new project. And I want to add track using our track preset. So at this point, I will go to track preset sampler and load that up. And at this point, so you just right click to save as a track preset. When you go to access, you could say load track preset, and at that point you could choose that you want it to be a sampler track preset. So just come right here, add track using track preset, and you'll see a category for sampler, and then that's really all you have to do, and you can use that in any project at that point onward. So my lovely sample editing. That's why I'm not a sound designer. Okay, so we have a question. I have an FCB 1010 MIDI foot controller I would like to use for controlling the VST amp rack, like in through maybe Thursday. Would I need to use the MIDI monitor control in Cubase to make assignments from pedal to VST? So if I have my VST amp rack, I will just add an audio track. Okay. I will go to my inserts. So I will go to under distortion to VST amp rack, and let's say if I wanted to control a wah wah pedal. So I'll come here, and then I think, one of the things you could do is, there's a couple ways to approach this. I think this will just respond to MIDI CC 11, but if I wanted to add a MIDI track to it, I could set this up. So I'll choose to route this to the VST amp rack MIDI input, and I will come over here to, and then at that point it's going to send MIDI to the plugin. So at this point, again, we set the MIDI to go to the VST amp rack as the MIDI port. So once that's enabled, then I think if we go to our MIDI inserts at this point, I will just go to, I think we could use a MIDI control plugin. So I'll do this. And I think this may respond to CC11 to expression. And at this point, you could just kind of use, CC11 to control your VST amp rack. Another thing you could do is have it as a quick control. So let's say I have my keyboard controller set up under quick controls. So one of the things you could do is if you come over here, we could say, let's go to track quick controls. And I could say, okay, MIDI CC 40 from my controller is controlling and you could just do a learn function right here. Go to your track quick controls, activate it, and you could click on this little learn button, move a parameter, and then that parameter automatically shows up, and I could just control that wah-wah directly from there. So that could be just the level of your wah pedal that will work. So those are a couple of different ways of being able to, but when you add a MIDI track and set its output to go directly to the VST amp rack, and that's the one step that a lot of people miss. Okay, just going through different comments. So right, my chat field jumped ahead, so bear with me while I navigate back to where we were. So I just have lots of questions in my future. All right. Okay. All right. So we have, I think it's Kyrie Tone from London saying hi. Okay, so I just see, hi Greg, how can I force a bass pattern in C, single notes in a MIDI track to follow a chord, root notes, and change the key both major and minor, playing live? So there's no way to trigger the chord track itself from live input. So you would need to kind of have the basis of this coming from the chord track. So if I wanted to, let me just add a quick instrument track, and I'll just get to like a synth bass type sound. Okay, I'll move my screen here. All right, so I will just adjust my controller. All right, so I'm just gonna hold down a quick chord and do kind of just a quick part here. I'll just do some arpeggios using one of the Apache arpeggiators. So I will just go ahead and record. And so I'm just going to play down a quick chord, and I'll auto quantize this. Okay, So I'm just holding down a C major chord. And we'll go a couple more measures. Incredibly exciting. Okay, so let's say I have my world-class bass line. So I think what the question is asking, I think we discussed this in a previous Hangout, but I probably had a pretty awful, incoherent explanation. So if we have this part, and I'll just... So now if we add a chord track, I could say we're going to start off in the key of C. And then if I want to just go to the chord track and say, okay, I want this to be F, and let's say A minor. So, and now as we do this, we could tell this particular MIDI track to follow based on the chord. So we could say follow the chords in scale. So as we play, and we get to the F chord here, this will we'll set up a modulation. So at this point, as soon as we have, these chords that will at this point we can say, okay, I want this to be, going to a G chord, and this part here, we could just have it, follow the chords. So as we do that, so there isn't a way to have the MIDI parts react that I know of to like the real-time input if you play the chord, but it could follow the input that's already on the chord track itself, if that makes sense. Now there's a live transform feature, and what the live transform feature will allow you to do is to play like any 3 notes. So if I put this into live transform, I'm going to play just the same 3 MIDI notes. And as it switches to different chords, it will automatically map whatever notes I play. So I'll just play like a C sharp, F sharp, and B flat. And now it's going to change based on, so the live transform, I could take any MIDI notes and have it automatically follow the chord track. But the existing, I can't necessarily create the chord track. I can't have the parts follow real-time input, which is what I think you want to do. And if not, just let me know. But it's not going to follow real-time input from the actual tracks. From if I play the chord on a MIDI controller, it's not going to change the part. The chord needs to come from the chord track and not from live MIDI input, if that makes sense. So, but if that's still confusing, let me know, and I'll try to explain it again. Okay, so question, can you please tell us how to do pitch bend to plus 12 or minus 12 notes? A lot of times the pitch bend is set on a per instrument basis. So you'd have to go into the actual instrument itself and set the amount of pitch bend range. So it's not necessarily going to be set per MIDI. So you could have pitch bend draw in and it may not work, but it can just simply be based upon how much So how much you actually, so let me just have this not follow the chord track. So, so each instrument may have a different pitch bend. So I think if we look here, this is the pitch bend amount for our instance of Halley Sonic. So I will just have this not follow the chord track. So I'll just go to kind of maybe a different sound to show this. So now if I do pitch bend, and let's say if I want my pitch bend to be 12, but only down to, so the pitch bend information is actually going to be determined by the actual instrument and not by the sequencer. So, and every instrument will have it in a slightly different area. So. Okay, so I just see a question, how to quantize my audio wave files, just like MIDI quantize using the key Q. So they really kind of can work the same way. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen. I will just kind of go back to this project and but you may have to have some elements kind of set up. Sometimes you could do it based on hit points. And sometimes you could use audio warping. It's not as straightforward as what we would expect for. Let me just delete these. So let's say if I have a drum loop set up here. If I go to my quantize setup, we could just choose to kind of do like audio warp. So I'll put my click on. So at this point, let me just set the, just set like kind of a rough tempo for the loop. Let's see if it's in the actual pool window, so this will make a little more sense. Okay, so it's 100. So I will just. All right, so now we listen to it roughly. We're at. So at this point, I could say, I want this to be set for eighth notes. I could select this, and then if I just have it set to, and I could just hit Q for quantize, and that could do like different warp markers, but you could also just go directly to like the sample editor and just go to hit points. And once you kind of have the hit points active, you could set kind of like your different sensitivity amounts. And at this point, you could say, let's create slices. And now I want this to be quantized to eighth notes, quarter notes. I could select all these slices and then just kind of quantize, based on those different components. So, but different audio, you can kind of come over here. Let's see if I can do it on maybe a more traditional project. So I'll jump here. So at this point, you can say, I want this to be straight to eighth notes, and then just kind of, you could hit Q, but you could also just create different slices or create warp markers based on the hit points. And then as I hit Q, you could see that would change. So, just kind of doing that. So I could select, just different regions, but, it's a little different than kind of quantizing MIDI. So you kind of, figure out where the warp markers are or place warp markers based on, your different components and say, okay, we have quarter notes, and you can see kind of the audio quantized just like that. Okay, reading through different comments. All right, we have Jason checking in from York, UK. All right, nice comment from Patrick. Says, hi, Greg. Hope you and your family are okay in these COVID-19 times. We've been just staying in, being boring, and I'm happy that I'm able to kind of transfer my work to doing a lot of online stuff like these Hangouts. So we see a question from Jazz Dude. Greg, do you know if MIDI 2.0 will be out soon and if it will be part of Cubase 11? We already have some different components of it in Cubase. A lot of the aspects of MIDI 2 were actually kind of derived from like our note expression information that we did with the VST 3.5 specification. There's also kind of like the profile things. Where you could communicate a little better with different synthesizers, and we could also see recently the VST specification has been updated to include more MIDI 2.0 centric things for MIDI plugins. So there's already a lot of MIDI 2.0 stuff, like with getting into like when we come directly to we could add, your note expression input device. So if you have like a Rolly controller, so you could have all of your MPE stuff that's already been implemented in. So we'll see more, but at a certain point, if there's no hardware that supports it, there's no, it's hard to kind of write stuff if there's no hardware that actually supports it. But I think it's one of the unique areas that Steinberg brings, kind of working with Yamaha, and a lot of the Yamaha people were, a very significant part of the development of MIDI 2.0. So, I think we'll see Steinberg implementing stuff, but, a lot of the stuff that Cubase has been doing since version 6.6 or in 6.5 is what the MIDI 2.0 spec was derived from, like the independent MIDI controllers on a note by note basis. So we'll see more of it coming out better. And, with MIDI 2, there's really no better resolution for virtual instruments. It's really kind of allowing more of hardware instruments to work at the resolution of virtual instruments. Okay. Okay, what is the best way to get a vocal sample to fit the BPM of the project? I've tried the audio warp and slicing processes, but both still require lots of work to get a workable samples that are in time. So, a lot of times just kind of knowing what the original tempo of the first recording was can make kind of a big difference having an origin tempo. If you know what that is. So I'll just revert this project quickly. And let's say I know we showed a little bit of like the tempo detection before. So let's just jump back to this file here. So if we have an audio file that we've figured out what the tempo is and we want to have other projects now follow this. So I'll just erase this part. So we know what the tempo is. So if you know what the origin tempo of the other file is and it has that tempo stamped to it, I could come over here, and this isn't a vocal file perhaps, but like if I wanted to take just a loop file, and let's say if I wanted to throw something just horribly inappropriate for this, so I'll show you just how you could do like different time stretches. So if you know what the original tempo is, you can just drag this particular file. So I will just move this to, let's say, our downbeat. And I'm just going to select the particular file and place it into musical mode. And once we kind of put it into musical mode, this will automatically match the tempo and be kind of like a tempo parasite, if you will. And I'll just kind of bring this volume down here. So as my jazz track speeds up and slows down, my loop or my vocal file can automatically match. So, and sometimes with the vocal, you may have to kind of just drop it in and, move different components around, doing kind of warping. But, for the most part, if it's recorded, and it could be part dependent, and I realize that, but if you wanted to now just, come over here and do kind of free warping on different parts and move, this to be, on the grid, you could do that quite easily just using the warp. So it could really depend upon the vocal file itself. But, if you know what the original tempo of the vocal is, that will get you in the ballpark rather quickly. Just by placing it, it could be a completely different tempo. But once you kind of know what the origin tempo is, place it into musical mode, and we could do it here or directly in the pool window, and then that will take a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So question, is there any way settings and preference that allows you to save presets in external effects in F4? Thanks for your great Cubase support. Unfortunately, I've been kind of lobbying and requesting this feature for a long time. To go to the audio connections and to be able to save, we can save presets for inputs. And for outputs, we could have presets, and group effects, we could have presets, but, we can't save presets in external effects or external instruments, but I am happy to kind of throw the suggestion out. I know I've done it just recently, but I totally understand the need and desire of that. So, but currently I haven't found a way and don't know of a way. Okay. Okay, so just see how can I snap a timeline beat marker to a MIDI note, not quantize. I want to tempo map a MIDI performance. If you're going to quantize like you could always do a MIDI performance as well. That is, so I think I have a MIDI file that was kind of recorded without a click track, just kind of like a solo piano piece. So let's say if I activate this and it's not really aligning with the click, at this point I go to project and I could go to the tempo detection. And say analyze. But if you needed to, and I think we showed this a little earlier, so, you could just, come here and select the audio or the time warp tool. And at that point, you could move these freely and adjust the tempo to the MIDI performance. So if at this point, I will just double click here, and if you have the time warp tool selected, you could just move the the actual beat directly to that, and it's going to make a new tempo map for you accordingly. So it's not adjusting the performance. The performance is staying the same, and you're adjusting the tempo and the tempo map to match that performance. So again, I know it was probably just a repeat of the question I didn't get to in time. So okay, so question: when saving channel presets, they could be saved in different folders. When recalling them, the presets shows up as a big pile all on the same page. Is there a way to have folders to show up? It tries to put it into a common folder, and these presets can be, and the thinking of that is like when you go to migrate to a new computer or migrate to a new version, it knows where to look for, and these presets can be saved. So one of the things that I would do if you wanted to is just to make sure that as you save presets, so that you tag it, because you could use the tagging to make sense. So let's say if I have an audio track and I'm directly here, and we have, I want to do like a high pass filter. I wanted to run it through these particular processes, and I want the gain, and I want this, to be set up just like that. So let's say this is going to be, my bass part. So at this point, I could, when I go to save a track preset, believe we could, so say bass, that you could go to the attribute inspector. So if you click here, you could say, okay, this is going to be for category bass, and I want it to be character, and you'll have, okay, so I want this for layered. I want the style of this. So I want a 5-star rating. This is going to be for blues music. And this is going to be electric bass, So, and at this point, I could say I'm looking for, at this point, I'll just say, let's, add track or load track from track preset. So I'm looking for bass. That's an electric bass. And that is set for blues music. And then you could kind of filter as necessary to have those attributes. So when you go to save a track preset, if you wanted to, instead of being overwhelmed with just a massive list, click on the attributes and put the attributes in. And then as you search for, I'm looking for keyboards, electric pianos, Rhodes, you could do the same type of thing and kind of surgically filter for your presets. And that way you're not treated with a zillion presets for all the same thing. So try doing, setting up the attributes for your track presets. Okay, just reading through life on a country farm in Texas. Seems like it's nice, especially in these pandemic times. Okay, so it says, Greg, in Cubase 10.5, how do you pick colors and assign to tracks and mixer tracks and channel? So we kind of had this question about like how to effectively kind of, mix colors, a little, utilize colors a bit. So let's say if I jump back to this project and I look at my mix console, so say I want my drums to be blue and bass red, guitars green, vocals yellow, whatever. So to pick colors, there's a couple different ways. One is on an individual track basis is you could just click here for colors. If we want to see if I wanted to select a number of colors and I wanted to switch these to yellow, I could go to my color palette here, have these tracks selected, and then you could, grab, let's say, the paint tool and just pick different colors for all of those. So let's see if I do it right. So I could, let's say, okay, these are selected. So once I come here, so, if I want to do multiple tracks at once, I could select all my drums and change those to, white, to yellow, whatever color I wanted to. And I got this question a lot. It's like, okay, how can I see this in my all the way through my mixer where I could see these different color schemes? So let's say if I come here, and I wanted to kind of see these colors, and this is going to be set by preferences, and then we would go to user interface to tracks and mixer colors, and at this point you could choose to have the mix console channel color. So if I hit apply, we see kind of the static mixers, and now, so once again, I go to preferences, to user interface, to track and mix console channel colors. Just make sure that you click there, hit apply, and then those colors and you could have them be, brighter if you wanted to. So the color strength. So if you really wanted it to be very obvious, or you could set that to default values as well. So whatever you want to, you could just kind of come there, hit apply, and that way you could colorize throughout kind of your entire mix console. So if you want to see all your inserts and sends and EQ window, you could do that very quickly and kind of see that color scheme carried throughout the mixer channel. Okay, so just And just see Jazz Dude says he has you could also do Project Logical Editor for coloring tracks with names. So synths could be this, drums could be that, etc. That's also possible. Yes, I guess I wrote the new Close Encounters theme with my composition there. So, yes. All right. And I see Gareth saying, time to smash the like button. So, for my compositions alone. All right. Hey, Greg, is it likely that Cubase Pro 11 will feature some enhancements to the chord track, more complex chord input, add 9, add 11th, etc., or do you continue to use the scalar workarounds? I think, if I knew what was coming in 11, I couldn't comment on it because it's not released. But, a lot of times you could come over here. Let's add a chord track. And I'll just take a quick look at a chord definition. So say C, if I wanted to, so you could do a C ninth. And then if you wanted to also get to the point, there are some preferences. So if we come here to preferences, and we could choose to, and if you go to chord track, so chords and photos, and here you could choose how you want different chords to be labeled. So, we had someone that wanted to have, their chords listed as a flat fifth, so you could have different display chords. So, so you may want to kind of check this out, but if you wanted a C9 to turn into C add 9, you could definitely do that using the, using the kind of event display for chords and pitches in here. So I remember earlier we had someone who wanted like a, not a C, diminished chord. They wanted a C flat fifth chord. So, we could, customize your different results here as well. So, but check out what you could, check out what you could do with that. But I think you could probably get to where you want to, probably in the current version of Cubase. So question, is Backbone just a plugin to create samples, or can I use it like a normal VST plugin? You could use it like a normal VST plugin. It does some amazing capabilities for, being able to do drum resynthesis in sound design. So, you could start off, Backbone, and a lot of people will treat it just as, okay, I just want to have, different bass sounds or, kicks. And that's one aspect of it, so let's say, or snare hits, and be able to, claps or cymbal sounds. So let's say if I just, hi-hats. But there's lots of like amazing impacts. So a lot of film composers, are getting it for different impacts, lots of kicks that are available, and you could tweak these, infinitely. But other things that you could do is just like little, a rise in the impact. So if you come here and you hold down the note, and then as soon as you release, you get the impact. So there's a lot of, and I released to send a MIDI note off message. So you just have your riser, and when you get to the point of impact, just let go of the note, and so it's kind of a bit of a misnomer. It comes with all sorts of amazing content, but if you think of it as just like a drum sample player, it's while it's amazing at that, and probably 200% of what other similar tools are capable of doing, that's just a fraction of what Backbone is actually capable of. So okay, so we had this question that was kind of sent in, if in the VariAudio editor, if we could see the name on the pitch of the note. So is there a way to keep the musical note name on the note event? It only appears when you hover with your mouse pointer, but disappears when you move the mouse away. So currently that's how it behaves. So just to kind of show, so if I wanted to look at particular notes that, I'll just make it a little larger here to make it more obvious that as you hover over, you could see the pitch indicated here. And I think just for kind of a user interface, so it's not always in the way, but I can see where having just the pitch remain checked would be useful as opposed to all of the smart editing controls. But you could determine the pitch based directly on where it is on the musical keyboard as the background. But currently, I don't know of a way to just have the pitch present unless you're hovering over the note. But like in our MIDI editors, if I wanted to, draw in some MIDI notes here. So as I draw in notes, we could so as we're here, if I hit Shift H to zoom vertically, that the note names appear. So I think it would be nice to have that consistency in VariAudio as well. And as you get to be shorter space vertically or vertically, that the notes will disappear, but the notes become visible at a certain point. So I'll pass that along. That makes sense to me as well. So. Okay, question, is there a way to set the scale for your project globally? For example, if I want my project to be set at E melodic minor, how would I do that? So if you want, within the chord track itself, there's a little icon here that says show scales. And at that point, you could set up your scale like so, and it may be locked, but if you come here now, you could double click on the scale and you could say, I want it to be E melodic minor, and that's what you could do. That's how you could set a key globally within a project, and as you do editing, you could have the color scheme. So if now I have that set, I could choose my color scheme based on the chord track, and I could have different notes that will be red that are out of key, green, this dark blue, which is within a chord but out of key. This is within the key, and a green note. So as I adjust, the green note is within the actual chord. So that's how you could do it. So within the chord track itself, there's this little icon. Turn that on. And you may have to, within the inspector for the chord track, to unlock the automatic scales. And then you could set that accordingly to different scales. All right. Okay, so let's see. I see Paul. He had asked about the time warping for MIDI notes. And his comment is yes, but it doesn't snap to the front of the MIDI note. Thanks, though. So let's take a look, see if we could maybe recreate that. Sorry, I'll just route that somewhere else. Let's see if we could get this to snap to the beginning of notes. So okay, and I'll just let me just see if I do this in the in-place editor quickly. And then if we choose our snap to events, so while it doesn't, I see where it doesn't snap necessarily to the event. Just trying to remember. Trying to remember what the yeah. So I mean, it doesn't snap to the event, but but for a lot of stuff, I would also try. And I see where that makes sense for it not to snap to the event because it may not be absolute or it could be on an upbeat. But you could also try the automatic tempo detection though. So okay, I see a comment. I hope Cubase 11 will get a note repeat function. So you could do it kind of with Groove Agent 5, the full version. So okay. Okay, reading through comments. I see nice comment from Agent K. Says Gareth K. Music. Greg will be expecting a royalty check from you. So yeah, it'll be my mailbox money. So okay, so I see a question from Chaser. Viewing the media bay, does anybody know if you can make the size of the folders bigger? So So as we look at the media bay, I think it's going to be kind of a fixed size for folders, and this is because I think, could be, I'll just see if there's any settings. I think it's going to be kind of a fixed size because often when getting the most out of media bay, people will be going through, hundreds or thousands of different folders in their system. So if you wanted to just kind of come here, so I think that's kind of fixed in the size, but you could pick and choose, exactly what you want to see open quite easily. But I think that those, as is the media bay on the right hand side, will be kind of fixed. So once we come over here to your file browser, and so I think that's kind of fixed just so you get more out of it. So question, is it possible that the note not re-triggers when I make glides at the sampler track? When I have a note that's 1 bar long, I have a smaller note in that 1 bar, it re-triggers the note, re-triggers the longer note. So let's give it a shot. I think that's how it works, but we'll take a look just to make sure. Okay, so it's so I think it's once you're in monophonic mode. Just fine, maybe. So I think that's how it works. It's going to re-trigger. But let me just... So let's say if I have this note held down, let's say I hold a longer note, a higher note, and I play the first note. Yeah, it re-triggers from the start of the note. But I can see where the desire of that is useful for a lot of different things. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so I just see, Greg, what is the use of the CR window at the right? Could you please give a quick overview of that? So the CR is going to be for the control room. So I'll get a project that can make use of it. So, and this is, so the control room, if you have this set up, allows you to, a lot of times when people are mixing, we would see a popular question was, I did my mix down and people are using their master fader as their monitor volume. And when they would have their speakers cranked up, they would have this down, and they would export, and they would get kind of a weak, kind of not a loud sounding audio file. So what the first thing that the control room would allow you to do is to actually set a monitoring level that doesn't affect the gain structure of the mixer. Now we could also have dim control. So, and you could set the listen, the dim amount. So now as soon as I hit the dim button, I could also set a known reference point. So if this is the loudest, I want to go to this specific volume level, I could just click right there. And if I hold down if I say this is the loudest I want to be, I could just say, okay, anything beyond that, I'm lying to myself. Just leave it alone. You could also have the click track on or off. If I have different down mix presets, if I listen to this in mono or stereo. Now, if you have more than one set of speakers, you could configure this to connect the speakers to, and everything's configured in the control room tab here. So if you have multiple outputs of your audio interface and you have multiple speakers, you could now take the outputs from your interface and connect them to different speakers. So at this point, you could say, I want to switch between my Yamaha HS7s to Genelecs to, whatever speakers that you want. Each of these speakers can have their own independent volume levels when you go to inserts. So if you say, I just want to have, different volume control for each speaker that I want to have, we could do that as well. So you could switch between speakers without having to have a hardware box that inherently colors the signal and tone of your studio. At this point, we could also do headphone mixes for your different, if you're tracking, and you could have a talkback microphone. So at this point, if you say, okay, I just wanted to have my talkback, we could enable talkback, so we could talk with a microphone in front of the computer to different musicians. So we could have that enabled. And, we could have different plugins for different setups. If you have external sources, like let's say someone brings over their iPad and they want to use that as, here, let's listen to this on your speakers so I get a bearing, is you could go to external input sources. And if you have those connected, we could, switch between inputs in external sources as well. So generally, this is like the kind of the tricky part that you see in a lot of large format consoles, to switch monitors, to switch speakers, to be able to down mix their mono collapse, to be able to do Q mixes without eating up your aux sends, to be able to, a lot of those functions. And that's what the control room allows you to do. Okay, so I just see a question from Scambot Terminator. Question, why is it when I add a new VST or effect I purchase into Cubase, even though I locate file for Cubase, it still runs through every file on my computer? Can Cubase look to make adding VSTs easier? So, once it adds a new effect, it does a quick quality assurance test. And some of the things that it'll do is it will go through and make sure that the plugin is going to be stable and it's going to kind of work in your system and not cause all sorts of crashes. It's also going to monitor, it's going to do an analysis of how much latency that plugin takes. So it'll ping the plugin and measure the latency. So as you kind of add new plugins, it's going to do an analysis to kind of protect you and to make sure that your delay compensation is right. So. Okay. So question, is it possible to lock on the drum map for a certain track every time I close it and open it up again? I'm at the MIDI editor. So it could be, let's just jump back to our project here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. And that way we could make sure that we could keep doing these Hangouts. So I will quickly revert this. Okay, let me just... And this question could tie into a preference as well. So there is a preference for, it's probably going to be under editing MIDI, maybe editing in general. Let me just see if I can find this preference really quickly. Okay, anyway. So let's say I have this track here. I don't have a drum map assigned to it. Okay, so at this point I will just, let me just play this back. And let me see if I'm in my mix. Okay. Okay, so we have this, and what I want to do now is I'm going to have Cubase create a drum map from the instrument. And once you have a drum map for the instrument, I'll just turn it off quickly so it's not to annoy you. I will create a part, and once a channel is assigned to a drum map, when I double click, it's going to launch the drum editor. So I just added that as we saw. So I'm going to resave this project. Okay, I will close the project and open it back up. And didn't like that, so let me just try, see if I can get it rebooted here. Sorry about that. All right, so and I will open up that project and see if it is preserved. So let's try loading this project, activating it. Okay, so I'm going to just draw on a part here and double click, and then that's automatically kind of saved directly with the project. So that's automatically saving it, but there is kind of that preference. Let me see if I could find it. Maybe it's under MIDI. Okay. But I want to say there's a preference that kind of automatically assigns, tracks are loaded to a drum map that will automatically, load it. Just see if I could find it quickly. But it could be just a preference. But, that seemed to kind of work for me. I'll see if I could dig up the preference. I thought it would be under MIDI. Sometimes they move some of the preferences around. Okay. Oh, here it is. So under editors, make sure that you have use drum map editor when drum map is assigned. So make sure that that is checked. So under preferences, editors, just check. Just make sure that that is automatically checked for you. So I think I maybe got another revelation for Gareth, so we'll see. All right, so just see from, but I haven't used Control Room before in my project, so interested too about it. Sorry, maybe basic question. We don't have to worry about any questions that are too basic, so we're all just answering questions that people have. All right. So I'm going to get a songwriting credit with Gareth K. All right, I'm happy. So question, would a MIDI bass track follow a chord track since it's normally single notes? Yeah, and as you do that, there is if you just have a MIDI bass part, one of the algorithms that you're going to have in the chord track for voicing. So if we say, okay, we want this is just to follow root notes of the chords. So that's probably the algorithm that you'd want, but it will automatically follow. So once you have root notes, that's kind of intended for bass parts. Okay, so I see a question when I'm composing to film and I need to change the tempo. At the point of the movie I need to change the tempo. The point of the movie I was working moves. How can I make the tempo and time where I was working if I can't the tempo of the project? Okay, so let's come over here and see if we could get this figured out. So let me open up a project quickly. Okay, so let's say I have, my video track here. Okay, so let's say, one of the things you could do is lock the video, but if I needed to find specific points in time, so I will just open my video window here by hitting F8. And then, if I'm here, I can say I want this event to start right there. So we can say this is where I want, and at this point we could choose to go to your transport. And you could say use video follows edit mode. So you may have to just check that. And I could say measure 20 is going to start right at that point. So I will just select my time warp tool, and measure 20 starts right here. And I need 4 even bars to go to, and right at that point, we switch to this person in our office. And that's how so the video doesn't move. So make sure that you, have transport, use video follows edit mode. So now when I look at this and I turn on my click track between those two scenes, I can have, equal number of bars. So if I just check my control room quickly here real quick. Just check my VST connections. See if I mess those up. Yeah. So at this point, I listen to my metronome. So at that point, I could get, just a perfect even number of bars from there. And let's say, and the video doesn't move. So if I wanted to go to right where we see these come in, so at that point, I will just say I will move that. And now the tempo slowed down. So, make sure that in the transport that you have use video follows edit mode. So then the video is going to stay. So, and then you could do a tempo map based on the visual events. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg, please. I have an issue to make a quarter scale with microtuner. Plugins as Silent, Contact Serum don't detect the scale, and microtuner. Thank you. I think, it's going to need to be a VST 3.5 instrument. And I think Contact is still at VST 2. I'm not sure what Silent is at, if that's a VST 2 or VST 3, but that's, part of the VST 3.5 specification. So it could be that those plugins aren't capable because they could be running older versions of VST. And if you wanted to determine if a plugin is VST2 or VST3, generally, when you go to add plugins, so say if I go to my VSTi window, we'll see these 3 little hashtags that indicates that it's a VST3. You could also go to your VST plugin manager, and you could see which VST version they're at. So if you want to do a contact, you're probably going to contact native instruments and have them update. I think VST3 has been out for a long time. So, 12 plus years, maybe longer, maybe 14 years. So it'd be nice to have, them take advantage of the capabilities of VST3. Okay, says, hi, Greg. Sorry, but why can I not see the loops and sample apps on the right side like before? Are missed Cubase apps from loops and samples? So, when you do this, let's say if I go to my media bay, I could see kind of all of my events here. So, there's a lot of factory content, like soul assembly, different loops. Or if you want to have more like, so some other different libraries. So there's a lot of content that comes with Cubase. If you don't see these, make sure that you go home and that you look under loops and content. If you still don't see these, you might just have to go to your media bay. And at this point, so go to your media bay and then go to VST Sound and try to right click and on your different folders here and then to just choose to rescan disk. And that may kind of wake it up if the connection was lost somehow. So I would try just to rescan the disk and and that will probably bring him back for you. Yeah, and I see more discussion about the VST3 instruments and microtonal functionality, and I see Jazz3 is commenting that it's going to need like a VST 3.5 instrument to really kind of take advantage of that. So, see if you could load those instruments or find equivalent sounds in, Halion Sonic SE, Halion Sonic, Pad Shop, Retrolog, some others. Okay, so hey Greg, what's up? Base Heads Calgary in the Hangout. Is there a way to copy all channel settings in pre-EQ to another channel? Hope that makes sense. So let's go ahead and I'll jump back to another project here. So let's say if I have a folder track here with some audio tracks, we'll go to the mixer. And here, let's say I adjusted. And I'll set my volume and panning. That I think you might be able just to. All right, so I'll have that as my track settings. Let me copy and so let me just see if I could just do. All right, so if I'm here, let's see if I just. I thought that there is like a simple copy and paste. All right, so let me just try another track here. I thought I saw just a second. Okay, so copy first selected channel settings. Yeah, so if you just select the first one here, you could copy the first channel settings and then paste to other channel settings. So now every one of these could be carried over just from the very first channel settings. Okay, just going through comments. Okay, my chat line just jumped for, let me just jump back. Thanks for all the great comments. If you've seen something new that you liked or learned a new trick, please feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so okay, so I see I'm just on my way out with my mountain bike, so I had to stop by and leave a like. We'll rewind later at home. Still have to catch up to the previous Hangouts. Cheers, everyone. All right, that's good. Okay, so question. I want slider 1 to control the volume on bass always on my MIDI controller, no matter where it is in the track order. Okay, so if I wanted to assign, let's say this particular track, I'll just call it bass here. Okay, so we could do this through a generic remote. I will come to my studio setup and go to generic remote setup. So if I will say I'm going to do a learn function. So I'm going to just move a knob and learn the function from the correct MIDI, assign the correct MIDI input and output port. So now it's captured that MIDI CC. And what I want to do is to go to Mixer, and I'm going to find my track called Bass, and I want to control the volume. So now wherever I am, this knob will always be fixed to controlling the volume of the bass, regardless of what is selected. So if you permanently want to have a control, a particular value that doesn't change, that's when we could use the generic remote control. So we could choose to set the input and output ports, click on the value that you want, and you could do a learn. So move the knob, come down to the bottom. So this is what incoming MIDI message is controlling what particular function. So we want to say fader 1 is going to be set to device, to mixer, to channel bass, to what parameter volume. Now, no matter what happens in this project, it's going to automatically just, that one knob is going to be fixed and dedicated to a particular value. And that's going to be different than the track quick controls, because the quick controls will allow us to have 8 predefined sliders or faders. And these functions, these quick controls, can vary depending upon the individual track. So whereas the generic remote is going to be fixed globally for that particular track. So the quick controls are dynamic. It could be changed on a track by track basis. The generic remote is kind of fixed, and think of it more as a global thing. So that's how you have one slider control just a volume on bass. Okay, so I just see how to set up dual mono bus compression in Cubase. So it's a bit different than other programs. But so let's say if I add a stereo track. So I add an audio track. Let's make it stereo. Then I can come to, let's say, my inserts. Let's say I add a compressor and I add a compressor again. I know this is a bit different of an approach. So now that I am in the channel settings, so I have my 2 different settings here. I could go to the routing editor and I could choose that I want this to be mono for that insert, and I want this insert to be a different mono. So I will say, let's use that one for this channel, and we go to the routing for that channel. So I have 2 different compressors with different values that are running, independent settings for each, for my left and right channels independently if needed. Okay, so question. Is it possible to make an instrument, guitar, accordion, sax from sampling from real acoustic instruments in Hallian or any other Steinberg instrument? Yeah, you could definitely do this. So, there's a couple of different ways of doing it, because Hallian, the one that's sold separately, which is on a deal right now, I think it's 40% or 50% off. There's current promotion going on for VST instruments, can allow you to sample directly in to Hallian. So I'll show you kind of 2 different ways that you could do it. So like I did one for a bass that I wanted to sample. And one of the things I wanted to do with my bass sample that I didn't like in other bass samples is I wanted every note on every string to be sampled. And what I did was, and let me just make this just a little louder so you guys can probably hear it a little better. But I set up, I set up like just an audio. I set up a project and I recorded each string. So if I wanted to come here, I could say, okay, we're going to go to E1. And I said, okay, this is on the E string. The pitch is E1. So I labeled it so that I would play that note, hit the next down button, and I would play an F note. So at this point, I would just say, okay, we want to. And I did this basically for every single note. And then I dragged them into Hallian. But Hallian can actually sample directly in. So if you want to get to the point where I think I have a project set up for this, like if you wanted to sample like a MIDI keyboard, really all you'd have to do is, let me see. Okay, here's a project. So let's say I have a Rhodes. And when we look at Hallian can actually have, so when I go, let's say to Hallian here, I could activate a side chain in Hallian. And then I could say I want my Rhodes to go to the side chain. There's different kind of Hallian configuration windows. So I'm going to come over here and just say sample recorder. At this point, I'm going to put a MIDI input onto both of these tracks. And I could say, let's just take our MIDI note on and note off message. Then I could just hit record here. And that will just sample directly in. And as soon as I have a note off message, it releases the sample. And we can see chromatically all the samples are just going up. And let's say I totally mess one up. I could just hit the mistake button. And you could just kind of continue on like this. You could have it automatically normalized if needed. So now if I want to play back, I could see my samples that I've recorded. They will just show up directly here. I could play these back, just by triggering those particular samples. And that's really kind of, a couple ways that you could sample directly. And this isn't the Hallian Sonic SE that comes with it. Groove Agent has similar sampling functionalities, the full version, not Groove Agent SE, but the full version, as well as the full version of Hallian, where you could make your own instruments and combine the samples with synthesizers and make an instrument with graphic user interface and be able to sell it. So, okay. So let's see. Okay, question. When I record MIDI notes with my keyboard and pre-count is on, the first note is always missing. Am I pressing a bit too early, or is it because of some Cubase settings? You're probably pressing just a little too early, but sometimes, one of the things that you could do if you do run into that, so let's say if I'm recording... And let's just do it on this track here. Sorry about that, so we can hear it. So, and I'll just have my... if you realize that you're probably just like a little bit early, one of the things you could also do is, use the retrospective record, so if you just kind of like, oh, it's the most amazing part, now you could just click on retrospective record and anything that you were noodling on or that happened before will just kind of show up. But a lot of times, you may have, like, as you record, you may notice that, you could have notes that are just slightly early. You could also have auto quantize. If you enable this in a transport, that could help as well. Okay, so I just see a question. Maybe this was cut off, but from Robert George. Hi, Greg. Is there a way? So maybe I'll see it later in the chat field. Okay, probably. Sorry. Okay, so I see a question from Paul. I see Robert's question. Okay, so when I use live transform, when I hit a key that is not in a scale, it just doesn't make any sound. Is that normal, or should it change to the note to meet the scale? So if you're doing the live transform, I'll just quickly have a chord track here. There's a couple of settings for live transform. So if we have this set, we go to the chord. So when you're in live transforms, set it to scales as opposed to chords. And then, that should, work with notes that are not just going to be within the specified chord. So if you have chords, that's going to restrict it to just the chords that are in the chord track. But you could also have scales. I think if you set it to scales, it'll kind of do what you want. Okay, so it says when tracking a when tracking a full band, when going from take to take, is there a way to create some kind of macro or something to make all tracks change to different versions? So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, I'll just put these into a folder quickly. Okay, so let me just... Okay, so let's say I'm recording my band. Come here, so let's say I record. Okay, so now I want to do a new recording. So I think I would just hit Control or Command Shift N. And so, or you could just go directly to, it says Control Shift N or Command Shift N. And if you go to your project menu, you can now come right over here, say you'll see track version. So you just say it's this keyboard shortcut for new version. So we hit record again. Okay, so record, wonderful take. Let's say someone messed up. All right, so we're going to come here. So again, Command Shift N, and then hit record again, punch in. And now if you wanted to switch, I really like take 2 better. So at this point, you could select all and say, okay, let's switch them all to version 2, to version 1, to version 3. So just Control or Command plus Shift and the letter N like Nancy. See a nice comment from Tom, maybe Gru. Thank you, Greg, for your awesome work. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you for the nice comment. And Michael Teams is wanting people to whack that like button, Cubase brothers and sisters. All right, I won't disagree. Okay. And as Gareth indicated, like that like button, likers. All right. All right. So I see Gareth sent a message to Ambient Dave. Yeah, tell him we're all thinking of him. So, hi Greg, is there a way to is there a way to export the tempo track in a MIDI file? I only find some proprietary file format option when I want to export tempo information of a project. So yeah, so let's come here. I'll just create a new project. Let me just close this one out of my amazing band tracking scenario. Lost to the ages. Okay. So let's say I have some MIDI notes here. And at this point, I'll just activate this project. So we'll have a couple of MIDI notes. I'll have my tempo track. Okay, so I have that, and now we'll export, and I'm just going to check. There could be preferences with this under MIDI file. So as soon as I come right over here, we'll say under MIDI to MIDI file. Okay, so let's just... Okay, because generally on the import, it's kind of set to import marker, master track. It's kind of usually on import tracks, it won't necessarily import the master track data. So I'm going to just say it'll choose to ignore. So let's say if I'll export this as tempo export. So I'm going to choose to export MIDI file. And I'll save it to my desktop. And at this point, we want to make sure that we export, that it includes, generally the tempo is, I'll just say export tempo here. And we'll hit OK. I'm going to take this project and I will import a MIDI file. And we'll have it create a new project. I'm going to go to my desktop and so tempo export MIDI. Come right there, and when we go to, you may not see it, but we go to our tempo track. I think it should now be visible. So there's our tempo track data, was automatically included with the standard MIDI file. But when you go to test to import, by default, as a preference, and it's kind of an annoying preference in my opinion, or just an option, it could be set to ignore the master track data. So I would make sure that's unchecked if you're testing that. Okay. Okay, just see a message just kind of popped in. Let me just check. Okay, so just see, is it possible to right-click a parameter in a plugin to show the automation lane? That would be super useful if you could show us. All right, so live input here. So let's say if I go to, and this could be, it might be a VST3 kind of thing, but let's take a look at it. So if I'm here, I have a plugin parameter, so probably more reasons for VST3. So, and if I want to right click on a parameter in a plugin. We could say show mod with automation track. I do that, and then our automation track is automatically opened directly for that parameter. And as I play, we'll see the automation just kind of follow that. So just kind of, you see the automation here changing based on the value. So with I know the included plugins do this, and it could be just a function of the plugins, but just right click and show drive automation of track. And then that will show up and open up that particular automation parameter in the track. So let me jump back. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, we're doing okay on time. So let me just... Okay. Reading through. Okay, so let me just... read through and just see another comment just kind of circled in. Let me just check that. Yeah, so the comment I just got, is it possible with third-party plugins? I believe it is, but it could be up to the plugin developer to manufacture. And if it's a VST2 plugin, it's probably not going to do that. So you could contact if it's not a VST2 3 plugin, you should contact the plugin developer and have them update. So I see question, why is my volume output so quiet from Cubase when the volume in Cubase is so high? For instance, when listening to this YouTube Hangout, I have to turn my speaker volume down and turn it up when I'm working on Cubase. All right, so this is, this could be kind of a classic thing. So, if you're doing this, if you have your speakers turned up high, check to see, if you're using, as we mentioned before, when we were discussing the control room, if you're using this actual master fader as your volume control, don't. Because, it's a common thing where, people, before we had the control room, all these people were using this as their master volume control. And then when they have it way down here, they export their file, and all of a sudden, it's like, wow, why does my mix sound really weak? And, the amplitude isn't loud. It's not punching like when I see other tracks. And it's because you basically told Cubase to drop it down by 40 dB. So set this to, try to keep that around 0 dB and use the control room, if you have Cubase Pro, as your monitoring source. But make sure that you don't have your speakers cranked up too loud for working with Cubase, and you're kind of have a gain structure problem between that. So, try to set your speakers to a nominal level. There's usually like a center detente where, it's not taking away gain or adding gain, and try not to use your master fader as a volume control. And then I think, you'll get it kind of sorted out. Okay. Just see a comment from Brilliant Entite, maybe, or Entite. Sorry if I'm probably just totally butchered the pronunciation of your name. No disrespect. Just saying, I love this DAW. I like it too. I think it's pretty cool. And I see someone else saying, best dog, can't wait for Cubase 11. Cubase 10.5 is the best update so far. Control Room and VariAudio 3 is both the most used features for me. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. I know we had some people that had sent some questions in. All right, so I just see from Werner, I can't seem to install the Cubase helper tool in the Steinberg manager. Message reads, failed to establish a privileged helper. Tried everything. Is this the right form for this? So I don't know what the helper tool is, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could try to do some more research on it. But, from the Steinberg manager, like the download manager, I've always just downloaded the programs and installed them as normal. Okay, and I just see a comment that sounds great and this is about using the control room, but I don't see how to do that yet. I've enabled the control room, but I don't know where the volume control is for it. So, once you have the control room enabled here, you first thing, and it seems counterintuitive at first, is you want to have outputs like if you have a stereo bus, have your stereo bus defined, but not connected. Go to the control room, add a monitor, and then you want to connect your monitor to the audio outputs. So once that's been done, you could come over here and in the control room, if you click on the main tab, at this point you see this big red knob. And that red knob will be your volume control there. Now, if you have the control room, those outputs going to your speakers, going connected in the control room, as well as connected in the outputs, it's going to doubly bus the signal. So you could adjust the control room here and say, oh, I still hear it. Why is that? It's not adjusting the volume as I think. And that's because you need to have the main output set to not connected. So hopefully that will help and clarify that a little bit. And see, great comment from Gareth. Mono is the secret of a great mix, especially now. For a long time, people were like, "Oh, I check mono, compatibilities like for TVs. Like old TVs, listening to that and doing a TV mix, and taking that out, make sure it translates to mono is just kind of a last quality control check." But how many people listen to tracks on their phones or iPads that don't have stereo speakers? So. So you just see a question. Hi, Greg. After pitch correcting a vocal track in VariAudio, I bounced the track to create a new corrected take. The bounce track didn't include the correction, so everything was gone. Is that the case? Yeah, you don't want to necessarily bounce it. What you want to do in VariAudio, let me just jump to... I'll just jump to a different project here. So what you want to do is to actually just flatten the process. So you can think of the bounce selection as more for consolidating edits. So, if you had an audio file here and you've done, different range, volumes, and you've had different sections and punch-ins and punch-outs, and you want to turn that into one easy to manage audio file, that's where you'd probably want to use the bounce selection. What is really what you want to do for the VariAudio is within, let's say, the VariAudio tab is, so let's say we're in the, if you wanted to apply those functions with the VariAudio and you've done all your editing here, go to functions and you just want to flatten real-time processing, and that would embed those changes into the file itself. So, but think of the bounce selection as kind of consolidating different edits and making one nice clean audio event, whereas the flattening the processing is embedding those changes that you've done in VariAudio to the file itself. All right. So I see someone has to go. They have a 3-year-old who needs their attention. I completely understand. So I'm surprised. My son usually kind of interrupts the Hangouts, but he must be watching a good movie, or he's probably on a series that has multiple episodes, and I'll try to take him to the pool after to get him outside. Okay, we see Michael Teams is checking out. He has to move on. All right. Good to see you on the Hangout, Michael. So question, how can I copy all the effects from one channel and paste the effects at different channels with 1 or 2 clicks if possible? So I got asked this question before, and it's probably just being a little dense in doing this. So let's give this a shot. So let's say I have 8 audio tracks. I will put some EQs and inserts. Let's say I'll just go to my mix console. So I will okay, so I'll just put a couple plugins in. Okay, and let's say if I come here and I have this EQ, I have, let's say like a high pass filter. Okay, so now I'm here. I want to select. I will copy first selected channel settings. Select the other 7 channels and then paste settings to selected channels. And now I will, as we look over here, I can see all the inserts automatically copied over. And I saw this in a previous Hangout, and I didn't do it this way. And I said it probably couldn't be done in a previous Hangout, but now if I wanted to look at all the settings, let's say in my full screen mixer. So if I wanted to look at the EQ, we'll see the EQ changes probably. So I'll say, let's look at the EQ. So that's all been applied. Let's look at the inserts. So once again, you can copy the first channel. So just right click on the channel, copy the first channel settings, and then select multiple channels and then paste those settings. Okay, so I see a question that we covered a little earlier. Okay, so I see questions since moving to 9.5 and now Cubase 10.5. I can't figure out how to change the color of my folders. Got to be something simple. All right, so let's take a look. I will come here. Let's create a folder track. We'll move the selected tracks to a new folder. I'll select this and I click here just to the right of the folder name. And now we could just colorize the folder as just like that. Okay, question. How can I record the pads from Groove Agent? Do I have to open a new channel? Moreover, the same question for the sample pad. How can I record the samples I slice in the sample pad? So I don't think that the Groove Agent, once we have it open here, that while we could audition these pads, and we could trigger the different sounds like so, but I don't think that these will transmit MIDI. So you would need to, have a MIDI control. So we could choose to audition these particular sounds, but I don't think that these transmit MIDI. But I'll just see. I'll just try something. Because there's kind of an internal routing. So if I come here, I'll just kind of put this into record. And let's see if I hit the pads. Oh, yeah. So all you have to do if you want to, is set the input port here to Groove Agent SE. And that will allow you to just trigger and program and capture those as MIDI notes. So if I'm playing along here and I have this into record, you could just trigger sounds accordingly. And how to record the sounds that you have sliced. Let me just jump back to another project quickly. So let's say I have a Groove Agent here. So a quick beat agent. I'll open this up. And I will just cut the kit. Just right click. And now if I drag this onto a pad and I slice the different loops. So as we do this, these can be just triggered again, but you need to set not to all MIDI inputs, but to the Groove Agent inputs. Okay. Question. How can I set a key command for waveform open in the sample track without dragging or dropping it? What is the exact order to do it? Because I couldn't find it. So let's say if I want this in the project, let's say if I control click, I could just, so if you Alt or Option click, or if you have the extended, just say create sampler track. And now that'd be all you have to do. So just from that selected loop, so it's probably going to be, so, if you just come right here, so just kind of right click on the file, and then let me just see if it's in edit menu. And there's probably a keyboard shortcut for it. So let me just look for a keyboard shortcut. So just type in create sampler track. Okay, so it's under audio. So at this point, I'll just put in assign a keyboard shortcut for it. So now I'll just drag a loop in. So I do that and then hit the keyboard shortcut under audio menu. So just come, and then there's just a create sampler track directly from there. All right, so I know we had some questions that were sent in. Let me get to those. I think we answered some of them throughout the course of the Hangout. Okay, it says, I have a problem with notes in the MIDI editor staying black after cursor passes, and I need to hover my mouse over the black ones to return to normal. Attach and attach the picture. Could you please tell me what came is, so so I can stop it? So if you have like this functionality going on, where it's just a preference, and it's going to be under editing MIDI or just editing, and then you'll see auto select events under cursor. So once that is enabled, as I hit play here, you'll see that the notes will become selected as the cursor passes over them. So to get rid of that, all you have to do again is go to your preferences, to editing, and uncheck auto select events under cursor. And then you're all set. Okay, so I think we covered the next one that was sent in. Okay. Okay, and we had the question about merging two MIDI tracks, and I think we showed this a little earlier, but we'll show it one more time. So if I have, let's say, my two MIDI parts, and I wanted to merge these on top of each other. So if they're kind of copied, we could, and you could go to the bottom here and you could switch back and forth between the active ones in the bottom center. But if you hold down the glue tool and just hold down Alt or Option and click with the glue tool, that will merge the two events for you. And then we also had, about getting the channel strips to show the same color as the inspector and the mixer. So if we have like our mix console, if we want to see these colors, that preference again is going to be under user interface, track and mix console channel. So if I turn this off, we'll say mix console channels, and I hit apply, it'll get rid of those colors, enable it. That will automatically apply the channel colors throughout the mixer, and you could have, again, various levels of intensity. And Jan from Stockholm, we had a question before about, in a control room. He brought up a really good point that I didn't realize. If you wanted to toggle back and forth between like a reference track in a Q mix and the mix, that if you just continually tap on, with the left mouse button, it could go back to the mix. You click here, it's going to go to Q1. So if you want to listen to Q mix 2, you could just kind of toggle back and forth without having to use a keyboard shortcut. But there's also a keyboard shortcut. But thanks, Jan, for pointing that out. That's a useful tip. I see a question. When will Cubase Pro be able to export as M4A files. You know, they're not nearly as popular as MP3 files. I know they're commonly used, but you know, MP3s are a bit more universal. But I will pass on the desire to have an M4A. You know, it could be like some weird codecs that require licensing or something, but it's easy enough to kind of do with a lot of freeware tools, but I'll include that. All right. We also had a question regarding Groove Agent SE. Someone had noticed that when I had on one of my tutorial videos that I had a full version of Groove Agent, and that there could be multiple agents. So you could have like 4 different agents here. So if you wanted to have, you know, like a beat agent kit, you could do that. If you wanted to, you know, couple that with, let's say, an acoustic agent kit, you have that option. And if you wanted to also include like a percussion agent kit, you know, we have this capability of being able to run, you know, very fast kind of hybrid drum sets, so that, you know, you could have kind of, you know, like beats and acoustic kits and percussion. So this isn't available in the Groove Agent SE. So only the full version of Groove Agent, which also offers, you know, sampling capabilities, note repeat, some, you know, additional pattern editing functions. That's in the full version of Groove Agent. So if you don't find it, don't rack your brains out looking for it. Okay. Okay, so we had answered a VariAudio question through here. Let's see. All right, so we also had a question about kind of automation and switching between different automation parameters for CC automation versus traditional automation. And when people were doing this, that it was kind of bouncing back and forth between them. And it wasn't working as expected, so I'll just do a new project. And I think this was with Pad Shop. So I'll just add an instrument track. Thanks for all the great questions that people have sent in. If you want to send questions in advance, you could send them to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Let your friends know about the channel as well if they are Cubase users, or if they're not smart enough to be Steinberg users yet. You know, you could show them some good tips and tricks and the support that we do. So let's say if I'm here and I have a particular note, let me just check out my audio connections quickly. Okay, so I just have, all right, so I have a patch here in Pad Shop where, so the question was, you know, whether to do pitch bend or automation as MIDI CC data, or to do it kind of as automation and kind of switching back and forth. So if I have, in this particular patch, when I hit a note, it sounds like this, and I move my mod wheel up, we can get a train kind of sound effect, right? So just, you know, when the mod wheel is moved up. So if I record this, we could go to our MIDI menu and we'll see kind of our CC automation setup. And I have this go to MIDI parts. So when I record a part, I could hit a note. And then if I wanted to move my modulation wheel, that's all going to be recorded directly into a part, and I will just click here and say, okay, let's show use controller. So I can see my modulation, and that's applied directly in that part. As I do this, I'm going to switch this to be an automation track. So now I could have parameters, my MIDI CC show up as automation. And when I do this, I have to click on write automation. So I'll record the MIDI data here. And now as I move my modulation wheel up, it doesn't record it as MIDI data, but now I could go to F6 and I'll just say show used automation. So we'll say show used, and now I could see my automation show up directly here. So it's not embedded in the part, but it's going to kind of show up as modulation. So, but if I wanted to go back at this point and record and switch that, this is where the question was kind of asked. We could go to your CC automation setup that it wasn't kind of working when it went back to MIDI part. So I will just go ahead and record this, and I'll just kind of hit the note again, hit the modulation wheel, our train whistle will come up, and then it's going to be recorded and embedded actually kind of within the part. So that's kind of two different ways, and I think the question was, when they switched back and forth, it wasn't working, but that seems to be kind of working as expected for me. Okay, and then I'm just going to check. I think I may have had one question come in earlier in the Hangout about ruler tracks. So let me see if I could dig that up really quick. Okay, so my question is, do the ruler settings not hold between projects? I work on post and music projects, and when I move between them, I have to manually change the ruler from timecode to bars and beats after I open the projects up. So it could be, let's go ahead and give a quick test. So let's say if I have a ruler track here, and let's say this is our post thing. So I will come here, add a ruler track, and I want this to be in format of times. So let's say I want this to be in time code. Okay, and let's say I will save this as post August 18th. Okay, and now I want to have this time code represented in bars and beats for the ruler track. So I'm going to save this as music, August 18th. Okay, so when I come over here, I'll open up post August 18th, and we'll take a look at it. And we'll see if the ruler is set to time code. I will open up my music, August 18th. All right, so I'm just going to close this projects. All right, so I'm going to open just music, August 18th, and that should be set to bars and beats. Okay, and I will open post August 18th, and we should see this in time code for. So that looks like it's staying, I think if you hit the period key on, depending on if you're in musical mode or, so if it's the ruler tracks, those seem to be carrying over. This, if you're If you're talking about the main timeline, you could hit the period key above your space bar, and that will automatically kind of switch between your secondary and primary time formats. So that won't be project specific, but it seems like the ruler tracks are project specific. All right, we got a couple minutes left here. I'm going to jump back to my live feed. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And we'll be doing our hangout this upcoming Friday. Okay. Okay, so I see Gareth checked out. Good to see you. We'll see you on Friday. Okay, so let's see. Is it possible to delete a naming after a certain point in a word? In the case here, for example, let's say going from violin 001 to just violin for all the tracks, thus deleting the 3 numbers. So sometimes we could do stuff like this in a project logical editor. So let's add an audio track here. So let's say violin 001. So we're going to choose to transform. This is in the project logical editor in the project menu. And we're going to say name contains, and let's say 001. And what we want to do is name to replace search string, and let's say 001. And we're going to just hit space here. And I'm going to duplicate this track a couple of times. Okay, so I'll just right click and, all right, let's see if that works. First, I'll just, without duplicating it. So if you come here, you could say name contains, and you could have 001, 002, 003, etc. Say, so name contains 001, and then under action target, and this is when you choose transform, choose name, and you want to do replace search string. And this is basically in parameter 1, what you want to replace and what you want to replace it with. So if you want to say, I have violin 1001, and you want to say every time it says violin 1001, you want it to say replace with purple elephant. All right, so now I could just come here. So we have violin 001, and now it's violin purple elephant, whatever you want to do. But if you want to get rid of it, just hit the space bar once, and you could save that as a preset. Okay. Okay, just going through some different comments, see how we're doing on time. So we got a couple minutes left. If I go over 4 hours, I lose all the generous YouTube closed captioning. So we'll try to get wrapped up here in a couple minutes. Okay, so question. Hi, Greg, from Dallas. How to select to see only purchased plugins from Apollo Twin? Well, I think I don't have any of the Apollo stuff or Universal Audio stuff anymore. But I think every plugin is visible. I hear complaints that every plugin is visible whether you purchased it or not. But if you know which plugins aren't, if you could go into your VST plugin manager and click in the upper right hand corner, and you can make a plus sign, and you could say copy current collection. Go through every one of the plugins that you haven't purchased that you get like a little annoying message, and just choose to delete those ones. And you could use that as your plugin collection. And that way you won't be tempted to purchase a plugin that you may not need because you accidentally used it during a trial version in a project. So. Okay, so I see a question from Ace. Yeah, we did at the very beginning kind of get your question. Okay, so we got that kind of, I think it was the first question, but we got it before. Okay. I see Agent K just mentioning that there's the Steinberg Instruments Summer Sale. And I see that's going on for a lot of different instruments and third-party Hallian content. And I see just a comment after, sadly, Backbone is not on sale. So that was just released a couple months ago. So, all right, see a comment. Thanks for all the infos, Greg. All right, so we have people checking in from Denmark. Okay, so how do you view other edit windows at the same time, or move from one channel to another from the same open edit window? So if you have a number of different, so let's say if it's a MIDI part, or let's say it's just an instrument track. Okay, so if we could come here, I will just draw in some mediocrity here. So, okay, and I will duplicate this track. Okay, and so let's say I duplicate these tracks, and I will call this 2. So if I select all these events and then hit Command or Control E, at this point you could, see the different events here and switch between them. So it's going to kind of carry this name over. Bear with me just a second. I'm just holding down Control and clicking. This is taking the name of the track to the part. So now you could see the different parts that are open. And if you wanted to have multiple editors open, I think it's a preference. So you can say editor content follows event selection. So if you turn that off, so now I think I could have this edit window, excuse me, open, and I could have another edit window kind of independently opened as well. And you could just kind of toggle back and forth between those different edit windows. But check out the preference. As soon as you come here to editor, content follows editor selection, or within the one editor, select multiple parts, and then you could just switch like so. So you could say, okay, now I just want to go to my bass, I want to go to cello, I want to go to viola, whatever. All right, so once again, just see, is it possible to right-click a parameter in a plugin to show the automation lane? So yeah, you could do that, and it might be limited to VST3 plugins, but if I'm here, I go to Inserts, let's say I go to the audio channel, so whatever parameter, I just right click and show sync rate automation track. So it may not work with all third-party plugins, but they could probably update it to make it work. So will Cubase 11 finally have polyphonic VariAudio? So we'll have to wait and see when Cubase 11 is released. All right, so with that, we're going to wrap up because I think we just went over. I want to thank everyone for all their help, and please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on Friday's Hangout. Goodbye.